Hi, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice, and today I'm taking a look at this game. It's called Discover Lands Unknown. As it says on the box, it's a game of exploration and survival for 1 to 4 players, and it is a unique game where every game is unique. What that means in this particular game is in this game you are going to be playing through 1 of 4 different scenarios, and you're going to be playing through 1 of 2 different types of terrain. Now, the exact combination of scenarios, terrain types, and other components are going to vary from one box to the next. So your personal copy of this game is going to be different from mine, and probably different from every other copy out there. So just to give you an example, my copy of the game came with an island terrain and like a snowy terrain and a certain set of characters that is probably different than your copy of the game would be, and so forth. All right. So that's kind of the unique aspect of the game. The game is basically about surviving in this scenario, whether it's on an island or on these snowy mountains, and or wherever your copy of the game might take your character. You're just surviving. You're trying to collect resources, trying to make sure you have enough food and water to sustain yourself, trying to fight off some threats that are going to appear. The game calls them monsters, but for example, on the island, they might be snakes and leopards and things like that. In another territory, they might be something different, but you're trying to fight off these aggressive creatures that are coming after you. And you're trying to accomplish some sort of objective based on the scenario in order to survive and escape this unknown land that you have found yourself in. I'm going to show you how the game works, and then we'll come back here and I'll give you some thoughts on it. So here's one example of how the game might be set up. The setup is going to vary depending on the scenario. It's going to vary depending on what types of terrain you have in your particular copy of the game. But here's just an example setup using the island terrain. You're going to see that the terrain is built with these tiles. The tiles have numbers on the back, and on the front they have just images of the terrain. The tiles are split up into these individual hex spaces, which is where you track your character's movement across. Each player has a character represented by a card, which gives you an illustration, a special ability, and a quote, along with the name of the character. So each character is a little bit different with their special ability. Each player is also going to have one of these. This is where you track your stamina down here. In a single player game, you start out with 12 stamina, and then you track your health with these 3 dials here. So each one of these dials is used to track if you have damage and what kind of damage. So like you can see, they're all set to these hearts. That means that you are at full health, no damage. When you take damage, you're going to adjust one of these to one of these types of damage. So you have thirst, hunger, disease or illness, and then you have wounds. All right. So you have those 4 different types of damage, and you can. So let's say we have some hunger damage here, and then later we get sick, so we put some illness damage there, and then later we get wounded, so we track that over here on this one. Now, if we take a 4th damage of any kind, then our character dies, and we have lost the game. But of course, you can heal yourself as well in various ways. Some types of damage are easier to heal than others. For example, hunger and thirst are fairly easy to heal. The sickness and wounds are much more difficult to heal. Okay. The thing you're going to use the most here, though, is your stamina. Your stamina basically tells you how many actions you can take during the day phase. Each round of the game is split into day and night phases. During the day, you're going to run around the map. You're going to do all sorts of things. And then during the night, you're going to flip over one of these cards and something bad is going to happen. And some other things are going to happen during the night. So let's talk a little bit more about what you do during the day phase. On your turn, you're going to use your stamina, like I said, to do various actions. One type of action is simply moving. So you have your little guy on the map. You can move him around. So starting from here, let's say we want to move to this spot. That'd be 1, 2 spots across this type of terrain. There's a little reference that's going to come with the game that's going to show you how much stamina it costs to move across different types of terrain. So we could see moving across the beach or the grass costs 1 stamina to make that sort of move. So moving over there would just cost us 2 stamina, putting us at 10 stamina. Now for another stamina, we can scout, which lets us flip over a tile. So we can just flip over this tile. We just have to be adjacent to the tile. And we'll go ahead and use another stamina to scout this tile as well, since we're also adjacent to it. Now, as we flip these over, you're going to see a few things. One, you're going to see some spots like this that have a some kind of object there of interest and then a number underneath. I'll explain. These are landmarks, but I'll explain how they work in a moment. You're also going to see little symbols like this. There's a little fish there. We've got some paw prints up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to find some tokens that have that little symbol in the corner, and we're going to put those on there. There we go. We've got fish, and we've got a couple of paw prints. So now basically we know that there's fish here, but we don't know exactly what the fish are, and we know that there's some animals here, but again, we don't know exactly what the animals are. Okay, but let's check out this landmark here. So we're going to use 2 more stamina to move over to that landmark, and then we'll use 1 stamina to investigate it. So the number there is 43. So we're going to pull up this deck of cards. This deck of cards is pretty much specific to this island scenario. And you can see all the cards are numbered in the top left corner. So we're going to go through till we find 43, and then we will retrieve that card and see what it says. So here we find some gravestones. It tells us 4 graves stand on the beach, etched with names so faded you can hardly make them out. Each stone is painted with a bullhead and other designs you cannot interpret. Nearby, bits of wreckage have washed up on shore, and it says Resolve Exploration card number 44. So, number 44 is the very next one, so we'll flip that one over. It tells us wooden planks and broken ship parts have washed up nearby. The wreckage leads you to believe that there was once a pier nearby. You salvage what you can, pay your respects to the lost souls, then move on. Then it tells us gain 2 wood and remove this card from the game. So we're going to do away with that card, and we're going to get 2 wood, which are one of the types of resources you can collect. So here's our 2 wood. We're going to add those to the resources we already have, which you start out with 1 food and 1 water. Okay, and those are our resources. Now the reason we want to gather resources is, among other things, we have these project cards that we start out with. These are projects, basically things you can build. I have, for example, here flint, a spear, and a basket. The flint requires a stone, the basket requires a wood, the spear requires a wood and a stone. So let's go ahead and make this basket project. So that will take 1 stamina from us, down to 4 stamina now, and it says for 1 wood, get rid of that 1 wood, and we get card number 91. That's an item card, so we have a deck of item cards here. We're going to find 91, which is right there, so now we've made this basket. So the basket says you can carry 4 resources on this card. So normally you're limited to a certain number of resources. I believe it's 6. You can see I've already got 3. The basket itself counts as a resource, so I'm using 4 of my 6, but I can put up to 4 resources on the basket. So now I'm only using 1 of my, slots to carry with, because the basket is helping me carry up to 4 things. So I don't need this card anymore. I can set it aside, although I can always go back and build another basket if, for whatever reason, I happen to lose this one. And I can still build the flint and the spear when I get some stone and some more wood. So, and these don't count as cards that I'm carrying. They're just, these are just ideas I have in my head, things I can make. All right, so I've done that. Now let's go over and check out this fish here. So I can use 2. Well, I'd actually use, let's see, 1 to go here. And then I believe it's 2 to move on to the ocean. So we'll use 2 stamina to wade out into the ocean, and when you get out there, you can use 1 to check out this resource here. So we'll flip it over. Oh, it's just food. So that goes into our supplies as well. Well, it's not food, it's meat. So now I'd have to take the meat back to the camp and cook it in order to make it food. All right. So that's kind of what I did on my turn. You can see I'm down to 0 stamina now. I could stop before I'm at 0 stamina, and any stamina I had left over would carry over to the next day. But I went ahead and used it all today. Now we go to the night phase. And on the night phase, we're just going to flip over this card. It's going to tell us a few things. It says, first of all, thirst. Each survivor spends 1 water or suffers 1 thirst damage. Well, I've got 1 water, so I'll spend that. Then it says deep sleep. Each survivor out of fire gains 9 stamina. Each other survivor gains 7 stamina. There is a fire here at our initial campsite. If I was there, I'd get 9 stamina, but I'm not there, so I'm just going to go back up to 7. Alright, so I've got 7 stamina now to start the next day. It says inspiration. The tribe leader draws 1 project card. Alright, so these are the project cards. I'm going to draw another one. Okay, a tomahawk, so that's another thing I could make. And then patrol. Move each monster token 2 spaces toward the nearest survivor. There are no monster tokens. These are animal tokens. That's different. If there are no monster tokens on the map, spawn 1 monster token at the lowest numbered landmark. Okay, so we only have 1 landmark revealed. It's this one right here. So we will grab one of these monster tokens and we will put it right there. All right, now the monster is there. I'm going to have to worry about that, pursuing me later. If I run into it, I'm going to flip that over and have to fight it. So let's kind of go ahead and show you how that works. So if I encountered this monster, I'd have to flip it over. It's going to have a little number on it. The number's 81. So now we would keep that there, and we'd look through this deck of monster cards for card number 81. There we go. It's a giant python. So let's say we have to fight this giant python. We've got 2 dice here. We're going to roll them both. And basically what we're doing is we're looking at the top number. This is the number I'm trying to get on this in order to damage him. So I did. I needed to get an 8 or better. I got a 9. And then 6 is the number that he is trying to get better than in order to be able to damage me. So he did, or he didn't. He got a 3 instead of a 6. So there we go. So we did some damage to him. We're going to use one of these tokens here to track that damage on him. He can take a total of 2 damage. So after we've done 2 damage to him, he'll be defeated, and the reward is 2 meat. If he had rolled high enough to damage me, then I would have had to track that damage on here with one of these things, and that would have gotten me closer to dying. But all right, I damaged him. I didn't take any damage. This is going to go just out of the way, set it aside, and he rolled a 3, so he's going to retreat, in that direction. Let's say if we had fought here, he'd be retreating away from me. Okay, so that's what happens there. Other things that are going to happen as you explore, I'll just kind of show you a few of the things you might run into. Let's see. Okay, like on this one, you have this spot here that's kind of hard to see, but it's like a little symbol of like a well pump. So there's a place we can get some water. You saw how I needed some water during the night phase. Otherwise, I would have taken some thirst damage. So there's places around the island you can replenish your water supply. And then you have this little symbol here. It's like a red circle with a white coffee cup. And there's going to be symbols like this around the board with, not all coffee cups. Some of them, they're all different things. And basically, as you go through, there's going to be some of these exploration cards that are going to tell you, okay, now that you have this item or this piece of information or whatever, if you take it to the spot where the coffee cup is, you can get this advantage or this thing will happen. Right? So there's that kind of thing. You saw how with the landmarks, I went there. It gave me kind of like a little bit of story telling me about how these gravestones that I found and evidence that there was once a pier here. And then I got some resources out of it. There's lots of stuff like that on the island, different landmarks like that. When you go and investigate them, it tells you what you found, kind of gives you some hints about what's going on the island, and maybe gives you some resources or an item or something that you can use later. There's going to be more of these monsters showing up. They're going to keep chasing you around the board and attacking you. You're going to continue to need, every night, maybe some food or some water or both. Sometimes these cards that you draw during the night will tell you to draw a threat card. Threat cards are over here. And they will say things like coughing fit. Uncontrollable coughing consumes you, and distant predators are alerted to your presence. If you have any Sickness damage, move each monster token 2 spaces towards you, otherwise draw a new threat card. A new threat card might be Contagious, which is not a good example. Let's see. What's another example? Okay, here's another example. Made to Fight. Spawn 1 monster token in your space. If you deal damage to it during this combat, it does not retreat. You'll heal 1 damage and fight a second combat against it instead. The enemy retreats during the second combat as normal. So, different things like that. They can bring out, more difficult monsters, etc. So, you're going to move around the board. You're going to try and do these things. I should have probably covered this first, but there's a small set of scenario cards that you're going to pick out and use for each scenario. This is the first scenario, which is called Cry for Help. It gives you a little bit of background story here, and then it tells you what you need to do. It says after survivor investigates landmark number 1, advance to stage 2. So somewhere on here, there's going to be a landmark numbered 1. Once you've investigated it, you'll advance to stage 2. Stage 2 will tell you a little bit more story, and it'll tell you what you need to do to advance to the next stage. And then the third stage gives you a bit of story, and then it tells you something you need to do to wrap up the game. All right, I don't want to show you the details of that. That's, I guess, a little spoilery, but basically that's what you're trying to do. So you explore, you investigate these different landmarks, you go for the objectives on the scenario cards. Hopefully you can complete them all before you die, and then you will have won the game. All right, so hopefully that gives you some idea of how Discover Lands Unknown is played. What I was demonstrating there was basically what the actions of one player would be, so that's kind of how the solo game would look. If you're playing with more than one player, it's basically just multiple people doing that same sort of thing. The advantages being that you can spread out over the board more, you can cover more territory more quickly, you can explore more landmarks and so forth. You can trade resources back and forth and cards back and forth. If you're close to each other, when somebody gets involved in a fight, other people can chip in and help out with the fight. So there are some advantages to multiplayer, but it's kind of a strange balancing act there because on the one hand, you can help each other out, but that means you kind of have to stick close together to be able to help each other out. And on the other hand, if you split up, you can cover more ground, but then you're not available to help each other out. So it's kind of, I'm not sure that it's really advantageous per se, or that advantageous, to be playing with more than one player. Also, if you play fully cooperative, which there aren't rules in the box for playing fully cooperative, but they did release online at Fantasy Flight Games website rules for tweaking a few things in the game to make it fully cooperative. So if you're playing fully cooperative, which is what I did, then if one character dies, then everybody loses this scenario. So it doesn't really make the game any easier to play with more people. It's just kind of a different dynamic, but not like a greatly different dynamic. Nothing game changing. It's fine. It's more or less the same, just with more people. So there's that. Overall, I think the thing about this experience is you're pretty much balancing two things in this game. On the one hand, you have these daily survival tasks, trying to collect resources. You're getting meat that you have to take back to camp and cook to make it food so that you can feed yourself. You're trying to you got to find fresh water and collect it and carry it with you so you have something to drink. You have to get wood and stone to build different things. You have to fend off, these monsters, these dangerous creatures that come at you. So there's those kinds of daily survival tasks that you have to worry about every round. And it consumes really a lot of your energy and focus in the game. So there's that's going on over here. And then you have the actual scenario, which is basically all about exploring the terrain, exploring the landmarks in the terrain, getting these little snippets of story, trying to figure out kind of what is going on in this location, what happened here, what is currently happening here, and how do we get out of here, right? That's the more interesting part of the game. The other part, the daily survival tasks, that's pretty interesting for, the first 2 or 3 rounds maybe. But after that, it becomes just kind of a chore to manage all that. The other part is the more interesting part. And the problem that I think I have with the game is that the daily survival tasks are such a big part of the game, and you can never ignore them or never let up on them. It just feels like from like the first 2 or 3 rounds, you might feel like, okay, we're okay. You start out with a few resources, and then you start to pick up some other resources, and you haven't taken any damage yet, so it's like, okay, we're all right. We can go explore some of this island, try to figure out what's going on here. But very quickly, all that starts to fall apart. You start to take damage. Resources become more scarce, etc. You find that you have to move farther away from the resources, like the fresh water can only be found in certain places, and I got to move away from the fresh water in order to explore more. And so after a while, you can't get away from just the daily struggle to keep your character alive long enough to focus on trying to solve the mystery and resolve the scenario that you have to do to win the game. And I feel like that's frustrating because the mystery part of it, trying to figure out what's going on here, trying to complete the scenario, that's the more interesting part. But you don't really get to focus on that very much because the struggle to survive is there. And perhaps that's a more realistic simulation of this type of scenario. Like if I was stranded on an island, I'm sure I would be struggling to survive and probably die before I figured anything out. But I feel like this genre of story about, the person who's stranded somewhere and they have to survive and then they start to figure out something and some kind of plot, some kind of story happens, right? Like that genre usually has some sort of transition about a third or halfway through where the character has figured out, how they can get food fairly reliably. They've built some kind of shelter. They've, figured out these other things to where their daily necessities have become much easier to manage, and now they can start to get caught up in the real story of what's happening here. And the game just doesn't really allow for that kind of transition. The daily survival part of it is just so heavy-handed, and it's just so hard to make any progress or get ahead of the curve there that it's really hard to enjoy the aspect of the game where you're actually experiencing the setting and the mystery and trying to figure all that out. So that was overall fairly disappointing. Now, some people have some strong thoughts about this being a unique game. Your box is going to be completely different than my box. I feel like it's okay. It doesn't seem... It's an interesting idea. I think it's cool to try new things, and so I'm not opposed to it being there. I didn't feel like my game was incomplete in any way. I had, 4 scenarios, 2 types of terrain, lots of different items and characters and everything, so I felt like I had plenty there to experience. I feel like if I had really enjoyed the game and I wanted to experience more of the game, I would be a little frustrated that I couldn't just go out and buy an expansion. That would maybe give me a couple new scenarios, a new terrain type, some new characters, etc. Instead, I'd have to go out and buy a whole other copy of the game and hope that the contents of that copy of the game were significantly different from what I got. That would be a little bit frustrating. But for me, it's not an issue because I didn't enjoy the game enough to want to keep playing it anyway, so not a big deal to me. But those are just kind of my thoughts on it. It's an interesting idea. I think it's fine to try new, different things. I don't think that this game necessarily benefited from it in particular, but it was fine. So those overall are my thoughts on the game. Unfortunately, not a glowing review. It's a little unfortunate because I like the general concept of the game. I like that idea of being stranded somewhere, having a little bit of like trying to survive, but also getting caught up in this mystery of like what's going on here. How do we get out of here, etc. I think that's a cool concept, and the game kind of gives that, but it's very heavy on the daily survival, and it tends to kill you before you can make much progress on the actually solving a mystery and making your escape. So, that's Discover Lands Unknown. Again, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice. Thank you so much for watching, and you enjoy the rest of your day.